know, do you know what that verse means?
I do.
Do you know, do you know what that verse means?
I do.
1 Corinthians 3:16 says, "Don't you realize that all of you together are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God lives in you?" To fully understand our verse of the day, we're going to have to turn back the clocks all the way to the Old Testament. From the very beginning of the Bible, we see that God's desire is to be close to his people. In Genesis, God set up this beautiful place called the Garden of Eden, where heaven and earth would overlap and he would dwell with his people. God wanted Adam and Eve to rule with him. God and man and God, two peas in a pod. Except, in this case, God was certainly the larger pea in the pea pod. I guess that would make the Garden of Eden the pod, and then Adam and Eve were smaller peas. So I guess really, when you think about it, it's three peas total. This really got away from me. Sorry about this.
You're not forgiven.
Anyway, they chose to go their own way, and so they were kicked out of the garden. They got the old stanky boot, as it were. But God still had a desire and a plan to dwell with his people. Fast forward a bit, and God rescues his people, the Israelites, out of Egypt and sets up a system for how he can dwell with his people again in something called a tabernacle, which was more of a temporary or portable setup until King Solomon built the temple. God's spirit and presence rested in this place called the Holy of Holies. Sounds pretty holy, right? Yeah. And there were these people called priests that could enter the Holy of Holies, and they would go in on behalf of the rest of God's people. God wanted the priests to rule with him.
Sounds familiar.
Adam and Eve, remember that whole thing in the garden? Yeah. But just like Adam and Eve, they chose to go their own way, and the temple was destroyed. But don't worry. God had a plan and still had a desire to dwell with his people. That's where Jesus comes in. Through Jesus' life on earth, his death and resurrection, instead of having a building as a temple, God's Spirit dwells in us who join God's family, you and me. Huzzah! This is great news. Our verse today is saying that now you are the temple of the Holy Spirit, God's Spirit. You can worship where you are. God can speak directly to you where you are. We have become that holy place that God chooses to dwell and live. This also means that our body is not our own to do whatever we want with. In a world that's trying to tell you that you're in the wrong body or you can do whatever you want, just remember that it's not just your body. It's God's temple. We must honor God with our bodies. Remember, God's desire from the very beginning was to be with his people. Because of Jesus, he's closer than he has ever been. And now you know what that verse means.
Now you know, now you know what that verse means.
I know.
Now you know, now you know what that verse means.
All right. I know what it means.